For people just tuning in, it's 11:16 p.m. on the East Coast in Atlanta, Georgia, Fulton County. Why is this happening late night, at least on the East Coast? Why is the district attorney waiting this long to speak on Monday evening? Take us through the day as you can through your reporting about how we ended up here tonight in this position.
Yeah, well, it is an unusual time. It's not usually that we would have a court proceeding and have an indictment returned at almost midnight, but yet here we are, and it is in part because this has been a day full of a lot of activity here at the Fulton County Courthouse. We knew that the district attorney was set to present her case to the grand jury today, which she ultimately did. That grand jury heard from a series of witnesses, and things started moving faster than expected. We were expecting some witnesses, for instance, to testify before the grand jury tomorrow. Instead, they got pushed up to today, late this afternoon, and by early evening, it appeared that they were starting to wrap up and that the grand jury was voting, and we started to see more activity with sheriff's deputies moving up to certain floors of the courthouse, specifically outside of the courtroom where ultimately this indictment was unsealed. And in terms of why we are here at this hour, I think in part the district attorney has been clear that she sees it as her duty to follow the law. If somebody broke the law here in Fulton County, it's her duty to prosecute. But keep in mind, there have been a lot of concerns here with respect to her own safety and security. She has received a number of threats and has only talked publicly about a sliver of some of the threats that she has received. So some of this could potentially be around the issue of security. Of course, you have less foot traffic here around the courthouse at 11 o'clock at night Eastern time. But also, because this indictment has since been returned, it only makes sense that she would address it and talk about it in more detail, and her team making the decision that she will do this tonight.
Jeff Pegues, when you look at this indictment, you've been reading over it the last few minutes, as someone who covers the Justice Department, which is also investigating January 6th with its own special counsel investigation, how does this fit in the bigger picture? Help us understand.
It really is interesting to see the contrast between the federal cases and now this local case in Fulton County, Georgia. For example, if you look at the Fulton County, Georgia case, you have some of these, many, frankly, of these alleged crimes caught on camera or audio tape with that phone call. Can you find 11,780 votes? This is the kind of evidence that prosecutors drool over because these were public statements. Rudy Giuliani made a lot of false claims publicly in press conferences. So really all you have to do is show that video to potential jurors and see how they receive it. But I'm sure the prosecutor has a pretty confident view of the case that they have. It's taken 2.5 years. We thought that this is a case that may have gone first in terms of a potential indictment earlier this year, but it's dragged out this long. They've interviewed a lot of potential witnesses, a lot of people who received target letters, and that's what you're seeing in this pretty massive case.
Because it became a target for Trump and his allies post-election 2020. They were looking for some way to stay in power, and they saw many states out there where the margins, in their view, were relatively slim and could potentially be overturned if Trump could get enough people to help him out. But Georgia, because it's a ruby red state, became a focus for Trump and Giuliani as they thought about how could they make this happen? How could they put into motion something that would keep Trump in power? And they thought about getting buy-in. They needed buy-in from the legislature. So they went to lawmakers in Georgia and they said, we need your help. They went to election officials, sometimes on the phone, like Brad Raffensperger, and said, help us, give us the cover of your word to say that this election was not legitimate in Georgia. They pressured the governor. And this was about Trump trying to get Congress ultimately to have a contingent election based on all of this activity in the states. So Georgia's important because it's a microcosm for what has happened in American democracy over the last few years. Georgia was a cauldron of this activity at the official level, the legislative level, the executive level, ultimately back in Washington with Georgia lawmakers being told to try to buy into Trump's plan. And David Becker has done a lot of work on this as well and has been really looking at Georgia. And I think, David, you can help us understand that while Trump and others were pressuring Georgia officials to do something, anything, to help him out, the alleged fraud never came to the fore because it didn't exist.